That's the most difficult week in the NHS calendar, which is why it is particularly disappointing that they have chosen this week over all the other weeks of the year to do this.
And I wonder if I can ask you, thanks for coming on the show. When did you last have constructive talks with the junior doctors? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, within 24 hours of being appointed by the Prime Minister, I reached out to the BMA and said I would like all the chairs of the BMA committees to come in and meet me. We did that within a couple of days. And since then, I'm really pleased that we have been able to find fair and reasonable settlements for consultants, but also now this week with specialty doctors. And so the only cohort that is remaining is that of junior doctors or doctors in training. And with those specifically, not only have I met them, as I say, at that meeting, but I also, a couple of weeks ago when the negotiations were ongoing, I popped into a Zoom meeting because I suspect everybody will understand they were all in their hospitals across the country, but I popped in to say, come on guys, let's do this. So we have been meeting, my officials obviously have been meeting them as well, and so there was enormous disappointment when the Junior Doctors Committee walked out of those negotiations and then called these strikes, because they have such huge consequences for your listeners and for the NHS as a whole.
Indeed. I spoke to Dr. Robert Lawrence, and I remind my listeners he is, of course, the BMA Junior Doctors Committee leader. Soon after your appointment, he said you brought a welcome fresh tone to it, and he felt that there was a much improved tone. We were close to a solution. That was when you first got the gig, the job. Why didn't the deal get over the line?
Well, look, I don't want to. I don't want to sort of go through the ins and outs of the negotiation itself, because actually I very much want us to get back around the table, and I want to encourage the Junior Doctors Committee to call off the strikes. The moment they do this, they could do this after this interview, and I'll happily leave the media around and go and have a meeting.
I think they're saying, I do apologise for talking over you. I think the doctors would have it the other way, respectfully, Secretary of State. Dr. Lawrence telling the Daily Mirror, why are they wasting so much time? I understand Victoria Atkins has another offer to make. Why doesn't she just make it? Why is she letting these strikes go on? Secretary.
All right. So 2 points to this. First of all, when the Junior Doctors Committee called the strike, that has very, very serious consequences for the NHS. NHS England is, I liken it to an oil tanker. It cannot be switched on and off at will. And so for the last week and a half, or however long it's been since they called that strike, we've had managers, we've had clinicians, medical directors up and down the country diverting resources and attention away from the challenges that the NHS faces every winter into trying to ensure that the system remains stable and safe during these strikes. We cannot turn that around on a whim. And so the deal is not just actually with junior doctors, but with all of the industrial action that has happened across the public sector in the last year or so. The government has said, look, we will negotiate, but you must, first of all, call those strikes off so that we do not have that hanging over us whilst we negotiate.
Do you have another offer to make?
As I say, we were in the midst of negotiations, and also.
So you do have another. There is a fresh offer potentially on the table if the strikes were called off.
Nick, as I say, I am in negotiations, and what is more, I have said not just in my conversations with the BMA and the committees, but also actually. In my conversations just yesterday with the Royal Colleges. Look, I absolutely understand from doctors as I'm walking around visiting hospitals that it's not just about pay. This is also about how they're treated at work. And so I really want us to see what we can do to help doctors feel valued, which is the word that a lot of them use to me.
I sense they're not.
To help them with that.
They're saying they're worth more than £14 an hour, Secretary of State.
Well, yes, and in that this year alone, we have increased the salaries, the basic salaries of junior doctors in training by an average of 8.8%. And importantly, what we've done is we've targeted the largest increases on those at the very beginning of their career. So someone in their first year has seen a pay increase already this year of 10.3%. And what that means is that their basic salary is increased, And when you add overtime and unsociable hour payments and so on, that means that the average income of a first-year junior doctor is just over £40,000. Now, of course, we look at career progression. Of course, when I look at the most experienced doctors in training, the basic salary for them is something like £67,000. And then, as I say, I've reached this agreement, which I hope consultants will vote for, that means that doctors in training can move up and progress towards consultancy in a much more efficient and qualifications and experience-based process, which is good news for, I hope, all doctors that are looking to continue up to consultancy.
Secretary of State, obviously we're not going to be able to avert the current industrial action. The next is scheduled from the 3rd to the 9th of January. How realistic are the chances that might be averted?
Well, that strike, the strikes over this 3-day period before Christmas are very difficult, but the system, as of my strikes call, the first one of the day at about 6:30 this morning, the system is stable, which is good news, and that is thanks, by the way, to consultants, to doctors, to nurses and other healthcare staff going into work today. My sincere thanks to everyone.
Will you be able to avert the strikes starting on the 3rd of January, do you imagine?
In terms of the January strikes, that's the most difficult week in the NHS calendar, which is why it is particularly disappointing that they have chosen this week over all the other weeks of the year to do this. My message to the Junior Doctors Committee is clear. Call off the strikes and we will be straight back around the negotiating table. And there will be doctors listening who feel uncomfortable, actually, about that, particularly that second set of strikes.
How concerned are you
for
patient safety that particular week then, Secretary of State?
We are taking it a day at a time. I am, NHS England they have systems in place both at national, regional and local level. There is an enormous sort of wealth of data coming in from individual hospitals, individual trusts and so on. And we are having to just take it sort of, day by day, but we're doing everything we can to prepare for that week in January.
Okay.
But it is going to be very, very difficult, which is why, again, I say to the junior doctors, please call off the strikes. Let's get back round the table.